So imagine your country is a person and it's been held as a prisoner, and that it is under attack not so much from foreign enemies, but from people in power. How would you feel? I can tell you how it feels. It feels terrible. And the reason I can tell you that is because I'm Belarusian and my country, Belarus, is being held prisoner by its own authorities. What is happening in Belarus is important to me, and it should be important to everyone watching.
And why do you care so much? Why is this so important to you?
First of all, I want to focus on what happened and not any political ideas, okay? Not the politics of any party or another, but nonetheless, I need to send a context. So in Belarus, we have had the same president for 26 years. It has not been a normal democracy with free media, independent courts, and human rights. And over time, our government has lost the people's support. There have been growing frustration with the system and the lack of social and economical development. Elections were falsified several times, but many suppose that Lukashenko, who has been in charge all this time, still had some level of support. But this year, things changed. And they changed in two very dramatic ways. So first of all, our government failed to address the COVID pandemics. They called it corona psychosis and blamed the victims. The state did basically nothing, and this caused widespread anger. And the second one was the emergence of credible opposition candidates who were persecuted and arrested, as usual. And this united all candidates' teams who presented a popular alternative to the government. So it seemed that everyone felt that Lukashenko, our first president, had lost the election. Nonetheless, the Central Election Committee gave him the victory. And this again sparked the way of peaceful protests, which were violently suppressed by the security services. So rather than scare people off the streets, this violence triggered a huge wave of opposition to the current government. Anyone who wants to know more about this can find it online.
Okay, so thank you very much for setting the context. I think that's helpful. And as Anna says, anyone who wants to know more, just go back to news sources you trust. There's plenty of information about this available. But I'm going to be slightly provocative. We prepared this in advance, and why, Belarus is not a well-known country. Maybe it's not a very important country. So what is so important about what's going on in Belarus at the moment?
Richard, I used to say, I'm from Belarus. It's okay if you don't know where it is. Don't worry. But I said it to make everyone comfortable. It wasn't really true. It's not more okay than not knowing where, I don't know, Cameroon is. Many people don't know where some smaller countries are, but no one should be proud of ignorance. So we know that Belarus is not well known yet. Let me explain why what's happening in Belarus is important. Human rights are important everywhere. This is not Belarus specific. This is just an example. It doesn't matter where are you from Belarus or Paraguay, from Botswana or Bangladesh. Caring about human rights, about freedom of speech, respect for others, it's important for everyone and everywhere. Well, it's not an accident. The Declaration of Human Rights is called Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So one reason why I should care about Belarus is exactly the same reason you should care about all oppressed people everywhere. Let me tell you about what's special about Belarus and why I'm so proud of my fellow citizens. The pride of your country can be healthy when it celebrates something good, right? Countries can be proud of their food, their space program, their education, their pandas, like it's happening in China. But Belarus should be very, very proud of the civilized and peaceful way they protest. The idea of peaceful protest is not new, but in our case, miraculously, it may be working.
So thank you. But so why should Belarusians be so proud? Why are you so proud of this?
You know, everyone who visits Belarus usually tells, oh, it's so clean, you have such a clean streets. And normally it annoys, but I tell you that Belarusian demonstrators have been leaving streets cleaner after the protests than they were before the protests. When people were standing on benches so they could look and see more, they took off their shoes. You can see a lot of photos of that, of people taking off their shoes and standing. There is absolutely no mob violence, no windows broken, no shops looted. There are a lot of volunteers who help caring about protesters. Volunteers brought water to the protesters because it was hot. They brought ice cream and sandwiches. Well, stationery shops gave customers paper and paints for free because, I quote, "We know what you need this for." Volunteers organized childcare for free, so the people with small children could go and stand up for their rights, knowing their children were cared for. But well, others brought children and even babies to protests. It was cute as well.
But is that really wise? And we saw the violence. Is it good parenting to take small children out onto the streets?
Good point. Good point. It was not right at the start. People brought children later. So the first protests, they were in the evening, and those were ones that were so violently attacked. Later, it seemed as if the police were losing their eager to be violent, their will to be violent. Maybe because demonstrators were peaceful. You know, we had this one day when early in the morning, all over the towns in Belarus, peaceful young girls or older girls, women, they came out in their white dresses holding flowers, and they made these chains of solidarity. Who would attack such a protest? So it's hard to say, but then people started marching and protesting in the daytime. It was more positive, more like open air festival, even atmosphere. So it became absolutely safer to come out with your children.
So it's almost as if the police were losing their will to fight. Was it really so peaceful?
Well, not really. Okay, this charming character of the demonstrations is in very hard parallel with terrible and systemic aggression. I said there was no violence by the protesters, but there was a lot of violence against them from the security forces of all kinds. The only time protesters were using force was to fight back, to try to protect their fellow protesters who were brutally snatched on the streets. Right now, about 7,000 people were detained, several hundreds were injured, and some people even died during the protests and later in detention. Right now, about 80 or 90 people detained at rallies are still missing. We don't know where they are. Are they alive? And the news keep coming every day. So when you refresh your social media, you see even more news about missing people. But people who were released from detention, they all describe the same beatings, the same torture, and the same condition of their release. Imagine they were let out without no money. They were very hungry and thirsty, having been denied adequate food and water for days, some with their clothes torn. Almost everyone needed immediate medical attention. They had broken ribs, punctured lungs, had injuries, terrible bruising. There were girls who were violently assaulted after their arrest. One of them was 16 years old. So something was very special about when they were released. Remember, people didn't know to what they would be released, even how they would get home. They were injured and frightened, they were traumatized, and they emerged from jail and they saw hundreds of volunteers waiting for them outside with the list of their names, with water, with food, waiting to provide assistance to drive them home or to the hospital. Protesting against the government has become a very powerful instrument of social change. You know, in many countries, new community spirit emerged from COVID lockdown. In Belarus, this unfair election procedure and absolutely medieval mass beating and detention of peaceful protesters, it has created a stronger society. So social awakening as a result of massive governmental oppression, it sounds pretty utopian. But right now, it's what's happening in my country.
Thank you. Thank you. So maybe before I ask you to explain why this should matter to the audience, it obviously matters to you. We can understand that. Please tell us a bit more about yourself.
Well, as you can see, I'm a woman, and part of what we are fighting is gender stereotyping at scale. The leadership of our country said that a woman will never be a leader, that we are basically sheep. Most Belarusian men are very much in favor of gender equality. But the fact that I'm a woman and the fact that we have a sexist government, sexist leadership, whose views of gender equality will be unacceptable for the vast majority of the audience, it's one way not so important. Our system treated both men and women with an equal lack of respect. Also, I'm a TEDxer. I've been watching TED and TEDx since 2009. It's more than 10 years. I've been actively involved in this community since 2015, when I gave a talk at TEDxMinsk in Minsk. TEDxers from all the countries and myself are united by believing in the power of spreading good ideas. What has been happening in Belarus, not just in these last few months, but for many, many years, shows that the expression of ideas and dictatorship are always in conflict. This idea in itself is important, and I'm here to spread the ideas. When I'm not doing TEDx, I'm a geneticist and an educator. I'm of Polish, Jewish, and Belarusian roots. I've spent the majority of my life in Belarus, so I care about it.
Thank you. And so again, why should people who are listening to this interview care about Belarus?
Richard, I think people watching us online should care for three reasons. First of all, Belarus is not the only unfree country in the world. If you're lucky enough to live in a free country that has some human rights, you should treasure them. You should stand up for them, defend them. But if you are unlucky enough not to be free, maybe there are things you can learn about the Belarusian experience and that can inspire you. When you're searching for a way to fight the human rights, just think about Belarus and its peaceful protests. Some may ask me right now, what does it actually mean to be free? What is it, free? It's very, very hard philosophical discussion, but we could discuss it for hours. The fact that I can talk to you freely, that I'm not afraid of being arrested for that you are not afraid of being arrested for listening to me, that our internet works and we are not afraid that it will be cut off like it's happening in Belarus right now. This is part of being free. Freedom can be very simple. The second reason you should care about Belarus, because it's important for victims to know that someone knows and someone cares. Belarus is not the only place where violence is happening. If we don't care about other people's problems, we are not civilized. It makes a huge difference for the sufferer to know that their prosecutors are not able to cover their tracks. Well, I don't need to tell the Polish people, the Polish audience, there is a reason the Nazis tried to cover their massacres and to destroy evidence of concentration camps. And in Poland and elsewhere, and that USSR tried to hide information about their crimes. Knowledge and caring raise the chance of truth and justice. But there is this third reason, and I think it has to do with TEDx the most. I'd like to believe that the Belarusian people have a lot to offer to the world once we are free. So somewhere in Belarus, there is an artist, a musician, a sports person, a gender rights activist, who will contribute a lot, not just to Belarus, but to the whole world.
So thank you for those three powerful reasons. And I'm supposing someone listening wants to help, and I should remind you that we're not meant to use the TEDx platform for fundraising. But beyond that, what can people do to help?
well, of course, there are people in desperate need, and I'm sure it's going to be very easy to find how to donate. As you said, the TEDx isn't meant to be a fundraiser, but anyone who wants can look on social media where to donate. There are other ways to help. People from Belarus would love to hear from you, whoever you are, high schooler, journalist, doctor, a housewife. You know, in Belarus, we know all about the power of housewives now. There are Belarusian people who'd love to be in contact. Use Google and social media. Find the professional and social organizations in Belarus that are active in the areas you know about. Send a message. Ask, how can I help? You know, become someone's Skype friend. There is something you can do always. It could be mentorship, it could be information, it could be support, an internship, a business, who knows? Just offer help directly. You may find yourself asked to help online teaching or maybe coaching a football team. There are people in Belarus for whom you can make a difference. I want to add one more thing, Richard. I know some people say they are overdosed with bad news these days, that it's all too depressing. And while it's very important to maintain your news media information hygiene, I'm doing it myself, of course, it's not a good idea to shut your eyes. A lot of bad things are happening at the moment. It's the COVID, it's global warming, it's anti-progressive movement. For me as a scientist, it's all very disturbing. But every once in a while, things miraculously move in the right direction. And extraordinary changes are happening in my country right now. So if you want a little bit of hope in your life, look at Belarus. Sometimes good ideas win through. It is well known that in spirit of struggle against the common enemy, people are often more united. So the final idea I want to share is that in Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko is not the common enemy. The common enemy is injustice. And my hope for Belarus is that working together for the future will bring more supportive communities and more justice and more freedom. And this is the idea worth spreading.
Thank you very much.